Welcome to Golden Mastermind Seminars Radio with your host, Jeffery Combs.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jeffery Combs. I have a very special and unique Facebook Live today. So if you're here today, you are unequivocally in the right place at the right time. And if you're watching this on replay, this Facebook Live is called The Payoff. This is one of my favorite topics to teach and one of the most misunderstood and complicated, complex two words in the English language for most of the world to understand: the payoff. And if you were here this afternoon, then you were in the right place at the right time. Shauna, good to see you. Anyone that is watching this content, if you're watching it live, send messages to people in your team, because this will be a very deep Facebook Live for you, because I'm going to cover in depth what is called the payoff. It's also called the experiencer, and it's also called the razor's edge. So if you're watching this content either on replay, have your team, your circle of influence watch it, because very few people understand how to articulate what the payoff is, and let alone how to facilitate people from letting go of it. So I'm going to go ahead and let the Facebook Live populate. Then I'm going to move into the inspirational portion of today's Facebook Live on what is called the payoff. So please feel free to join this content. So Shayna, let's see, one of your teammates is sending me a message. The Slago woman is sending me a message about the call. She sent me a message, want to know if she missed it. So if you want to let her know that I am here, I believe it's Delane. So I am here for Facebook Live today. It's 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and I'd like to welcome everyone here. And thank you, Shayna, for your awesome content here, or for following me, and your compliment. Today's Facebook Live is called The Payoff. So I'm going to go ahead and move into the inspirational portion of today's Facebook Live. Sunny Sweet has joined me from northern Mexico. She is one of my clients going back many years. She is a facilitator in a horse rescue ranch, and I just came off a call with Sunny. She is in northern Cabo San Lucas. So, Sunny, good to see you here this afternoon. John McFadden. So, John, all of you that have been my client for years, do your best to breathe and release, let go, watch this more than one time. For those of you who come to Millionaire Blueprint, I do this for 2 hours on Saturday at Millionaire Blueprint. John Bob just rehired me, so that is awesome. So, good to see you. Sarah, good to see you this afternoon. The Facebook Live today is a very unique content called The Payoff. Delane, good to see you this afternoon. Sunny, good to see you. Sunny, if you can, get Crystal to follow the content today. It's going to be very deep, so I'm going to move into the inspirational portion. So for 26 years, I have been a coach one-on-one. I don't do group coaching. I have spoken in over 1,042 times. I've spoken in 4 different continents, and I've spoken in 47 states. So I've been an inspirational speaker, and I've specialized in addictions, recovery, consciousness, letting go. That's one major side of my enterprise that I coach, speak, and write about. I also have been teaching free enterprise skills since I myself was a teenager. I worked for a few millionaires before I was 31 years old. I worked for a man named Harold Martin. He had an interest in a bank and a hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. I was his driver when I was 16 years old. I mentored with him. I worked on his farm. He was a multimillionaire farmer, and he was a hard money lender. It was more of a soft money lender. He typically loaned at 8 to 10% back in the day, and I was like a grandson to him. My grandfather, Carlton Stewart, was a multimillionaire. He owned a Stormore steel bin franchise, and he also was a farmer. He owned 3,000 acres of land in southwest Iowa, Creston, Iowa, and that land today would go for $20,000 an acre. My parents are large landowners in southeast Iowa. I started doing fix and flips with a guy named Kenny King when I was 21 years old. I worked in Italian restaurants, top-tier Italian restaurants in Kansas City, and I mentored with the great Victor Fontana, who also is connected to Jim Bomarito at the top restaurant in St. Louis called Tony's. And multiple friends of mine went on to become millionaire restaurant owners. Michael Garozzo owned Garozzo's in Kansas City, 5 of them. Eric Sweeney owns Hayward's Barbecue, one of the top 5 barbecue restaurants in Kansas City. Charlie Gito, who was Michael Garozzo's cousin, owned 2 Charlie Gitos in St. Louis. So I grew up with aspirations of becoming a millionaire. I mean, I was absolutely committed to becoming a millionaire, but I spent 14 years of my life being an addict. And I wrote some content earlier this morning. If you can go back and like this content, here's what it said. I've been destitute. I've hit rock bottom on 2 occasions. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol for 14 years. I was emotionally bankrupt multiple times, $100,000 in credit card debt when I was 38 years old. I was upside down, $600,000 in investment property right across the street. I went upside down $600,000 in that business. I failed in 5 different businesses. I was audited by the IRS on 2 different occasions, and the CID came to my door. I was part of a Patriot group in the 90s where they came to my door after 9/11. My accountant's office got raided. He let me know that I was going to be getting that visit. So the IRS came to my door on 2 occasions. I had a contractor file bankruptcy on a project I paid off and got sued by his vendors. I did not know what the term mechanics lien meant. My commercial property got a lien put on it by one of my subcontractors. I didn't understand what that meant. And it meant when she went bankrupt, I was liable for her debts on a property that she never paid for the concrete. And it was a substantial amount that I had to pay off. I've been through many challenges, 2 divorces, and my most valuable lessons that I have learned is to pay the price of success without knowing the cost. Be willing to stay in the process. Practice sobriety. Stop complaining. Stop whining. Stop being sensitive and defensive. And man up, cowboy up, because freedom is not free. Be willing to pay the price for it. And so that also means be willing to pay the price of success through the simple discipline required to be an exceptional business owner. And this requires skills, habits, and mindset. Now, what happens to most of the world is they are stuck in a place called the payoff. The payoff means, and I'll cover this as deep as I can with the time I have allowed so that you'll have an understanding of it. The payoff means recreate the same situation to fulfill the same set of feelings. It creates a neurochemical bond between the brain and your gut, and then you're left in a state of overwhelm called fight or flight. It's called the razor's edge. And as you begin to have a better understanding of this mechanism of fight or flight and the payoff, I will teach those of you I coach one-on-one or those of you who follow me the recipe to releasing the trauma bond in that 1/10 of a second called the razor's edge. It's the razor's edge of the ego. Now, the ego is the lower self. So when I use the term ego, I never mean eccentric or arrogant. The ego in my world is the lower self with a lowercase s. So your higher self is consciousness. That means you understand, you're aware, and you know. And many of you that I've been coaching are really starting to grasp what it means to understand the payoff and let go of it. Those of you who had the privilege of seeing me speak the last year and a half, I cover this term, the payoff, on a whiteboard, and I promise to do it on a whiteboard. I'll do a Facebook Live. I'll do a Saturday Facebook Live where I'll spend an entire hour on it. So today I only have about 20 minutes, but I'm going to give you just the basics so that you can let go of the trauma bond and the reflex of the payoff so you're not recreating the same situation over and over. Step number 1 is rigorous honesty. You admit that you create this payoff over and over to fulfill this without getting into this space. And so these words, you eliminate these words from your vocabulary, because if you don't, you'll just keep recreating it. The words that you let go of regarding the payoff is, this doesn't make sense. Well, why would I do this? This is dumb. This is stupid. This is crazy. Why would I want to do this? It's not that you want to do it, you do it. It's not a want or a wish or a maybe. It's the body keeps reacting. It reacts. So you're reacting to stimulus. To let go of the payoff, you learn to respond to the stimulus so that you are stimulus response rather than stimulus react. When you are stimulus reacting, you're in the emotion. You're in the neurochemical response. You're consuming the cardio cocktail of fight or flight without even knowing it. And then you're pissed off, you're angry, you're upset, you're frustrated, you're disappointed, you're avoiding, you're procrastinating, you're feeling rejected, you're feeling abandoned. You're in the space of grief and you're in panic. You're in grief and you're in apathy and you're in these emotions. You go from 0 to 100 without even knowing it. So that means you're trapped in the win-lose dichotomy called force. And so you become a force to someone else's narcissism. You become their counterforce. Or you yourself find someone to be in conflict with to fulfill this neurochemical craving that you're emotionally addicted to. So this means that the relationships that you enter and encounter will be dysfunctional. You'll either be the codependent or you'll be the rescuer. You're going to be one of the you'll be the person who gets rescued, or you'll be the rescuee, or you'll be the perpetrator, or you'll be the violatee in these dysfunctional relationships. So when you live in the payoff, you will continue to attract the perpetrators that will violate you so you can justify your existence, so you can justify your feelings, because this always happens to me. And this is what's important you understand. It's not a fault, it's a fact, and it's your responsibility, your ability to respond, to be able to separate your feelings from this trauma bond and these panic patterns that you create to fulfill these feelings. This isn't difficult, it's not hard, it's honesty. It's not difficult, it's not hard, it requires understanding. It's not difficult, it's hard, it's consciousness. And if you will allow yourself to have a better understanding of this phenomenon called the payoff, then you will no longer be the trauma bond, the panic pattern, or the neurochemical craving to fulfill this instant gratification that you require. When you live in this payoff, you require conflict. You require a drink. You require food. You require pharmaceutical medication. You require vaping. You require marijuana. You require something shiny, something instant, something RFN right now. You require right now because your ego seeks pleasure. Now, when you let go of this, and see, this isn't even pleasure, but that's how the ego sees it. It's instant gratification. Here's a good one. Look on, if you really want to, the Oreo cookie is very unique. The Oreo cookie, when you start to understand what's on it, it's an FM sign. You can understand, if those of you understand, can read sign language, it's a free, and you can put the other term in there. And they also use this symbol. And when you see some of these symbols, up is down is up, I mean, that's all part of the signs and symbolism that we are seduced and we are introduced to, and then we don't even know it. So when you're eating those Dorito chips, understand that they are triangles, and there is meaning behind those triangles, and it means that they're shaped in a 33 1/3 degree form, so that that's right, Shauna, so that you begin to see these people that use these signs and symbols. And so this is how you have been trauma-based mind controlled. And so you are trauma-based mind controlled to walk up to pharmacies and say, red pill, blue pill. And you may have been fortunate enough to step out of this. And just like Lynn is saying, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So many of you are awake in this woke world. But if this is the next level of consciousness for you, is to let go the trauma bonds and the panic patterns that keep you experiencing the payoff. Here's what you have. You have 1/10 of a second. That's the razor's edge. That's the fine line between fear and faith. That's the fine line between trauma and joy. That's the fine line between yes and no. I watch people, they want to hire me. They're right there. They contact me. They call me. They're ready. I had a woman, I spent 45 minutes with a woman who I'd coached 10 years ago. She'd been through a very challenging trafficking situation, and she was just coming off of that 10 years ago. Now she's in a very dysfunctional relationship. She sought me. She was that close to hiring me, and she said, let me think about it. Now, the reason that she will think about it, and I will never hear from her again, because I have 26 years of experience, and I can read this like nobody can. Because I can tell in the panic patterns, I can tell in the speech communication, I can tell in the pauses. I understand when people are lying to themselves and they say they'll get back to me and they never do. This is what you will understand, because that would contradict the payoff. And this woman had the money. She was right there. And she said, well, let me get back to you. And this is what happens to so many people. They're right at the verge of a breakthrough. They're right at the precipice of letting go of that addiction. But that would contradict the payoff. And so people go, well, that's crazy, that's stupid. It is not. It is not crazy, and it's not stupid. It is why people will continue to sabotage their success to fulfill the neurochemical craving of dysfunctional relationships, dysfunctional partnerships, dysfunctional businesses. That's why they'll sabotage themselves over and over to fulfill the neurochemical craving that keeps them doing what they're doing. I had a woman send me a message last night. She booked an appointment and said, wait a minute, can we do it next never? And she put it off. And so when people put it off, I'm never following up with these people because it doesn't qualify for my time. I know that they're addicted to a payoff, and I'm looking for people who are committed, not interested. I'm looking for people who are serious, not people who would like to, not people who are kinda, not people who guess they are. I'm looking for people who are absolutely committed to living the good life. Jim Rohn was famous for asking this question, what constitutes the good life? I had the privilege of sharing the stage with Jim Rohn on 6 different occasions, and I was just absolutely mesmerized by his posture, his peace, his ability to glide on the stage, the way he could paint the picture with his words. And he used to say that, what constitutes the good life? If you have pennies in your pockets, 0 in your bank account, and creditors calling, it's time to change your philosophy. I listened to Jim Rohn for hundreds of hours on audio cassette in the 90s, along with Frederick Lehrman, Prosperity Consciousness, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. I used to listen to Earl Nightingale. I've read thousands of books on the subjects of codependence, recovery, sobriety, quantum physics, religion, philosophy, spirituality, multiple books. I've read I have hundreds of books on conspiracy, the agenda, the world order, multiple situations that I have studied for 40 years. One of my first breakthroughs to what was behind the veil was 1979. I lived in Kansas City, Missouri, and 5 cities showed the movie, The Manchurian Candidate. It was the re-release of the original 62 version before Kennedy was assassinated. That movie was re-released in 79, and I saw that movie, and I started downloading the content. I started following the Warren Commission, and I was absolutely hooked on that content. And I've absolutely been chasing that rabbit hole looking for the truth. And so the truth doesn't set you free. The truth allows you to understand your enemy. And so if your enemy is your lower self, wouldn't it start to bring you to reason that it would be a good idea to let go of that? To let go of and separate your feelings from the people you've let traumatize you, to let go of the shame you hold on to let go of the people whose guilt to control you, to have very clear boundaries so that you're not in this payoff. The reason that people stay in this payoff, because there's deep anxiety about being responsible. And this is what many people, so they might be able to be responsible for them in a little business, but to be able to move into a leverage business, into a real estate business, a direct sales business, a network marketing business, or to be in an insurance business where there is the ability to be responsible, to respond to the stimulus, many people go into fight or flight because underneath all of this is their ego, which is their lowest self, is not good enough. Based on sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional traumas, codependent situations, adult child of an alcoholic, adult child of a narcissist. When you grow up in this environment and you're exposed to this environment over and over, and you spend 20,000 meals in these environments with people who traumatize you, abuse you, and most importantly, criticize you, then you yourself become your worst critic. And so when you become your worst critic, you're not going to let go of the payoff until someone comes along that understands and can facilitate or orchestrate this. I've been clean and sober for 36 years. The first 10 years of my recovery, I was a dry drunk. Now, I went to the meetings, I read the big book, I did the 12 steps and 12 traditions, but I was still trapped in this emotional state. And then the next 10 years, I went through 2 divorces. And then the next 5 years, now I have 25 years of sobriety. Now I have 36 years of sobriety. The more that you understand cause and effect, then you will no longer be the mind-body connection to the events that shape the feelings. Shana, my good friend Kevin Paulson is asking you and Scott to reach out to him. He's a very good friend of mine. Please reach out to him. He's a good man, and he absolutely deserves your connection. Kayla, good to see you this afternoon. So if you're joining me right now and you didn't see the first part of the first 20 minutes, go back and I'll hit the replay button and record this for you. But this is deep content on what the payoff means. The payoff means stay in relationships with addicts, stay in relationships with narcissists, attract people who you can be in business with who will violate you, have bosses and managers who will constantly criticize you and not reward you for good deeds. You will stay in codependent relationships where you enable yourself, over-obligate yourself, do too much for others. You will underachieve and under-earn so you can fulfill the neurochemical craving, the trauma bond, the panic pattern of not being good enough. This isn't crazy. This isn't stupid. This is as real. This is as real as it absolutely is. And when you become honest with yourself, rigorously honest with yourself, that you are good enough, because the greatest lie you tell yourself is that you are not good enough. When you start to tap into that power, that edge that you have held back from, when you start to find that bite on the side of your teeth like this, I will not be denied. When you start to find your peace, when you see that is God. When you were there, that's your providence. When you surrender, because the only possible way that you can let go is by surrendering to God, by surrendering to self, by surrendering to your higher power, by letting go of this force, this trauma that you hold on to, this low self-esteem, the avoidance tendencies that keep you doing the same situation over and over. When you tap into that power and you let go of that force, you will absolutely begin to change who and what you attract, because the universe will reward you by opening up. And the people that you deserve to attract will show up organically. They will show up holistically. They will show up naturopathically. They will show up on command. They will show up, but it's going to be your responsibility not to talk yourself out of it and sabotage yourself because you are not good enough. So the payoff is what we do over and over to fulfill the neurochemical craving that keeps us not feeling good enough. The payoff spelled is D-O-U-B-T. The payoff is doubt. That's what most of the world lives in, is doubt. That is your lower self. So the lower self, the ego, is not the real you. The real you is power. And so that power is non-physical, it's emotional, it's etheric, it's energy, it's transmutation of God, it's spirit, it's the Holy Spirit, it's divine, it's the providence. That's what you are. And when you're able to let go of the trauma you've held on to, the stories you tell yourself, the lies you tell yourself, as you begin to have clearly defined boundaries about who you let in your circle of influence, as you start to let people, places, spaces, and situations go, free of guilt, as you begin to let go of the shame of the things you've done to yourself, you are unequivocally starting to free the ties that bind, that keep you handcuffed to the payoff. You are good enough. And when you begin to understand this, then you will no longer be the mind-body connection to the events, to the trauma that keeps you in brain fog, that keeps you under-earning and underachieving, that keeps you with this anxiety about responsibility for others. You're not responsible for other people. You're responsible for yourself. You lead by example, and you see who follows. But many people, they get so codependent and they try and take care of everyone, then they get so overwhelmed that they can't even take care of themselves. So when you have a better understanding of what the payoff is, so the payoff is that fight or flight mechanism, and you have about 1/10 of a second to say yes or no. So when you know you should say yes, but you go back to no, what you did is you just went back to the payoff. When you know that the opportunity is right there in front of you, but you keep putting it off until it's perfect, that's your payoff. If you're going to hire someone in the future, but you could do it right now, Well, you're just sabotaging yourself, or you're going to start this business in the future, but you can do it now because it's not perfect. Well, you're just sabotaging yourself, and then it's never perfect. So then all of a sudden your life's over, and then you go, God, God, please, why didn't I do this? I should have done this, and that's called regret. That's the payoff. When you hold on to regret, or you create your regret, that's your payoff. The more that you continue to sabotage yourself, the older you get, the higher the tolerance you have to recreating the same situation over and over. That's the payoff. When you're a chronic avoider, a chronic procrastinator, and you're so overwhelmed and you pull it off the last minute, that's your payoff. When you should have and didn't, that's your payoff. Oh my God, I should have rolled the dice on that number. That's your payoff. The shoulding is payoff. That's what the payoff is. When you're successful, there is no payoff because the pleasure isn't worth the pain. When you cross the bridge, when you come over this side of the bridge, and you can decide, you can commit, there is no payoff. As long as you continue to hold on to the neurochemical craving that keeps you breaking down, crying, feeling weak, in doubt, overwhelmed, not certain, not sure, as long as you live in this space, you will continue to recreate the same situation. That's the payoff. And the payoff isn't pretty. It's not glamorous. It's not instant gratification. The payoff is trauma. The payoff is doubt. The payoff is worry. I don't want to worry. Well, why do you? Why do you worry about the future that hasn't happened? Because you grew up in a household where you feared your father coming home. You grew up in a household that was unpredictable. You were traumatized by this person or that person. You married someone, you dated someone, you had a boss, you had a significant other, you had an upline, a downline, whatever the situation is those trauma bonds and panic patterns that's created the brain fog that creates your doubt, that keeps you playing small, that keeps you just barely getting by, that keeps you winging it, that keeps you pulling it off at the last minute. It's exhausting. If you receive this contact today, feel free to hit the like button. Hit the like button. That will put you more frequently in my news feed. If you just came on and started watching this content today, just this afternoon, I will hit the record button and you can watch this content. For those of you who just came on, the topic of today's Facebook Live is letting go of the payoff. Here it is right here. You can see it again. So this is the content that I am covering. If you are relatively new to my content and you have not taken advantage of a free 20-minute coaching call, or if you've been thinking about hiring me, but you've had this story, well, I'll do it when it's perfect. I'll do it when I can get around to it. I'll do it when this. Well, that would be the payoff. But if you're serious and not curious, if you're committed and not interested, reach out to me, send me a message, request a 20-minute coaching call, or just do what's best. Just hire me and then get into my coaching rotation, and I'll teach you very quickly how to release the neurochemical craving, the 1/10 of a second, the razor's edge of the payoff, so that you're not anxious about the responsibility of being your best self. Once again, if you want to speak to me, send me a message in Facebook Messenger, or you can go to my website and fill out a 20-minute survey, and I will get back to you within 24 hours. I'll be back on Facebook Live this evening at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That will be 9 p.m. Pacific. Lynn says, hire him, best investment you can create. Shayna says, I highly recommend Jeffrey's coaching. And Diane says, Heather Hopke. So Kevin Paulson says, 30 minutes of gold. Thank you, Jeffrey Combs. Thank you very much, every one of you. Breathe, release, and let go. I'm going to hit the record button, and you can watch this on replay. Have a great evening, everyone.